The sexual marketplace as we find it now is ironically more difficult than it's ever been before, but it's also easier than it's ever going to be again, because we're at this position now where there is a global sexual marketplace. Things have changed radically in the last 10 to 15 years in ways that none of us could have predicted, and with consequences that nobody could ever have foreseen. So we're in this really strange period whereby the way that people get together for dating, for relationships, even for marriages and long-term partnerships has just totally altered from how it was when I was in my teens and in my early 20s, and certainly how things were for my parents and for their parents, etc., etc. So the landscape has entirely altered in a really, really significant way. And I sometimes don't think that people even really appreciate the degree to which the terrain that we're now operating on is not the same as it was, and we need to react to it in a very different way. So what do I mean by this? Well, effectively, today we have a global sexual marketplace. It's no longer the case that you're just dealing with people in your local town or your local village or your city even, or whatever sort of geographical location you want to talk about. Today, sex, relationships, dating take place on a global scale. So how does that work, and why is this happening? Well, of course, it's happening because of the dating apps. It's happening because of technology. So you've got the dating apps, you've got Tinder, you've got Bumble, you've got Happen, all of those things. We know about that. But you've also got the social media apps as well. You've got Instagram, you've even got Twitter, you've got Facebook to some extent still. But probably the most significant of those is Instagram. And what's happening now is that rather than, whereas say 10 years ago or 15 years ago, perhaps a girl, her dating options would have been limited to the people in her local town or the people that she met when she went for nights out, or maybe to some extent some of the early dating sites, things like elite.com and Plenty of Fish was sort of in operation then. But now you're in this situation where, the choice is suddenly global. And think about what that means on a micro level. So I was in St. Petersburg a year or so ago, and I got chatting to a girl who was working in a shopping centre there, very pretty girl. She was selling perfume or spraying people with perfume as they walked past. And I got into a conversation with her, and we end up exchanging Instagram. Now, this girl was probably in her early 20s. She had a fairly low-paying job, if you like. She wasn't a skilled professional. She was just somebody working in a shopping mall. And she said to me, look at my Instagram. Me and my sister call ourselves the twins. And so I added her on Instagram, and I was looking at her feed that night. And sure enough, her and her twin sister, another very attractive girl, both obviously, very similar in terms of the way that they presented themselves, their style. They were natural blondes, very, very glamorous looking. These two girls had created this Instagram account together. And it was, I think at that point, they had about 10,000 followers or something like that. And basically, it was just pictures of them going out and about, enjoying themselves, going to nightclubs and bars and things in St. Petersburg, and just having an amazing time. And fooling around. There's a few holiday pictures when they'd gone to Turkey, all of these kinds of things. The sort of things that an average Russian girl of that age would typically do. Now, fast forward several months later, and suddenly I'm looking at this feed and I'm seeing these girls in Dubai. And I'm seeing these girls in these really expensive hotels and resorts in Dubai. They're on yachts, they're in casinos, they're in expensive nightclubs. Suddenly the clothes they're wearing are much more glam. So, everything's been taken up a notch, and they're spending significant periods of time in Dubai, because you'll get a picture one week, then a couple of weeks later another picture, etc. So clearly the job in the shopping mall what's happened to that? That's gone to the wayside. How is it that these girls, who probably aren't earning very much money and have regular jobs, suddenly end up having this glamorous movie star style lifestyle in Dubai? Well, the answer is obvious, isn't it? They have obviously met with a guy who has decided that it would be a great idea for him to get them to come over and spend some time with him. And that's just one example of what's happening on a macro scale in the dating marketplace. So whereas, I mean, I first visited Moscow in the early 2000s, and at that point, the social media and dating applications in Russia were not developed at all. And so, you know, when I finally got to St. Petersburg a couple of years ago, the landscape was entirely different, because now girls were able to pick and choose from a global dating market as opposed to just a local dating market. So when I was in Moscow back in the early 2000s, it would be pretty unusual for a girl to end up, you know, being flown over to Dubai, or, you know, being suddenly plucked from her mundane day-to-day life and put into that new scenario. That just wouldn't really happen very much. But now all of a sudden, this kind of thing's happening all the time. It's happening with great regularity, and guys who go out and meet girls regularly through cold approach, or even guys who meet girls regularly through the dating apps themselves, like Tinder, etc., etc., these guys are seeing this happen in real time. This kind of thing is happening constantly all around us, okay? So now, it's no longer how it was when I was growing up as a teen, you know, 17, 18, and, you know, Jane in your class who you fancied, you know, you kind of think, well, maybe we'll get together and maybe we can start a relationship and maybe, you know, we'll end up getting married and having children and everything else. That was the dream then. Now, and that dream, by the way, had a reasonable chance of coming to fruition, because how many options does Jane have? You know, you're living in a small commuter town, say. Maybe she goes into London occasionally, maybe she goes into the local big city, but by and large, the people that she's meeting, the men that she's interacting with, are the guys that she grew up with, are the guys who live near to her, are the guys who are geographically close to her, okay? But that just isn't the case anymore, because suddenly you've got Instagram, and you can put a picture of yourself on Instagram where you're in a bikini on the beach, or you are sipping cocktails at, you know, the local hotel or whatever, and some dude thousands and thousands of miles away can see that picture and think, she's cute, and then decide that he wants to initiate a relationship with her. So that's great for him, and it's probably great for her as well. But what does that mean for the dude in the local town who maybe wanted to date that girl? Well, what it means is that his opportunity to date her has been removed, or at least it's been downgraded, let's say, because, you know, why would she want to go out with Bob the builder, or the guy who's working in the local McDonald's, or whatever else, or the office guy who's sitting at his desk in the cubicle for 12 hours a day, when there's this opportunity for this kind of exciting lifestyle that just came to her through social media? You know, it's incredible. And we hear about this all the time. I mean, there are very, very beautiful girls, as many people know, in the former Soviet Union and in Russia. And when you think about Russia, it's a massive country. You've got the big cities, but then you've got, you know, Siberia, you've got the wastelands where, you know, thousands and thousands of miles, not very densely populated, and there are some beautiful girls living there. And previously, those girls would have dated and married and had families within their social set, because what else were they going to do? That's just how things were. But now, all of a sudden, a girl like that can, and this does happen, this happens regularly, can get approached via social media by some dude with a blue check account, with a lot of followers, with, you know, great muscles, great tan, good looking guy, rich, well put together. And he can say to that girl, listen, I saw your feed, I think you look really cute, I would like to see you, I would like us to meet, and I would like to see where things go. And then all of a sudden he's flying her over on, you know, first class, whatever, business class, over to his location, and he's meeting up with that girl. And that is having a knock-on effect in the local dating marketplace. So multiply this out across, you know, the whole world, times 10, times 1,000, whatever, and you can see that things are being very radically altered. You can see that, as I said at the beginning, the landscape is just not the same as it was a few years ago even. And really that's what this entire course is about, because we have to accept that that's the case, and we have to find ways to live within that reality. Because look, you might be thinking, I don't like the way things are. I don't like the current sexual marketplace. I don't like the fact that suddenly this is all global now. Suddenly my competition is not just local, but it's actually global. You might not like that, but you're not going to change it, okay? The genie is not going back in the bottle. As much as you might wish that, it's just not going to happen. And that's what I mean when I say it's never going to be easier than it is now. Well, that's the reality, because look, what do you think is going to happen with this technology that we're talking about? Do you think it's going to go backwards and there's going to be less connectivity, or do you think it's going to go forwards and there's going to be even more connectivity, even greater opportunities for people to meet and get together across the global sexual marketplace? I think the answer is pretty obvious. It's going to become even more interconnected. There's going to be even more opportunities for this kind of thing to happen. And, you know, it's a problem. It's a problem if you are stuck in a particular location and you're not able to leave that location for whatever reason. And the potential pool of girls that you could date within that location are suddenly being picked off by people from, you know, men from other places who are operating at a very high level. Now, what I don't want to do here is to scaremonger, because of course, the truth of the matter is the story that I told about the twins in St. Petersburg, I'm not saying that that thing is happening all the time with every single girl. It's not like that. I don't want you to come away from this feeling despondent or feeling like, oh my God, so this means I'll just never find a girlfriend, I'll never be able to date. It's not as bad as that, okay? But you need to be aware that at least there is the opportunity for that to happen. It's a possibility in a way that it like I said, it just wasn't 10 or 15 years ago. And here's the other thing, right? Abundance in terms of sexual opportunities, and this goes for men and for women, is sort of a bit like I don't want to say it's an illusion, but it's something that it's a perception that you have in your mind as opposed to the reality of what you're physically doing. So what I mean by that is this: if a girl has an Instagram account, she's got a lot of followers, she's getting loads and loads of likes on her pictures, and she's probably posting those pictures in order to get those likes because that feeds her ego and she gets that attention which she likes, fair enough, then that's going to give her the perception that her value within this global marketplace is at a certain level. And she might not actually be going and dating these guys. She might not be taking that opportunity to fly to Dubai. She might not be, taking the trip to Vegas to go and meet the bachelor who's, connected with her in her DMs. She might not actually do that, but the fact that she possibly can is going to have a knock-on effect in the way that she perceives her local opportunities, the way that she perceives the local dating market. And then, if you are the average dude, then she's going to look at you and think, well, okay, Jim is all right, decent looking guy, probably very nice, earns a middling income at a good company. He could be a good sort of provider, but he's not the same as this guy in Vegas. Now, I'm not going to go to Vegas with this guy because I'm not like that. I don't want to get into this kind of like transactional sort of thing. I'm not going to just get flown over the world by rich guys. I'm not into that. But she's going to be thinking, my standards are higher now because I can see potentially what's out there. I can see what could possibly happen. So even if they don't actually act on it, and as I say, this goes for guys as well in a slightly different way. I'll explain a little bit later on about that. But if you have a perception that you have a high sexual market value, then that's going to carry through into the decisions that you're making on a micro level. So this stuff is really significant and it's not going anywhere. It's not going away. As I say, it's only going to get more interconnected. There are only going to be more methods revealed to us for how people can get together, for how relationships can start. And this, as I say, is really, really having a significant effect on the dating marketplace in real time. And so what does that really mean? in terms of the way that dating is operating? Well, sadly, and I don't say this with any pleasure, but I think it's a fact that we have to face up to. The truth of the matter is that dating and long-term relationships are becoming challenged. Now, that's not to say that they're impossible. I don't want you to come away from this module and think, oh, so he's saying that I can't ever have a long-term relationship, I can't get married, I can't have a family, all that kind of stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. It's still doable. People do it. People are happy. It can work. However, what I am saying is that look at the factors that are stacked up against that long-term relationship working successfully. You've got all of this opportunity. You've got these dating apps. You've got these social media platforms where, you know, you're married to this girl, maybe you've been married 2 years. Suddenly she's kind of not quite feeling the buzz anymore. The tingles have slightly gone. And then some guy who she used to know from her past, or maybe she dated before, slides into her DMs and he's chatting to her and she's thinking, oh, this is kind of exciting. This is, I wonder if this could go somewhere. This could be kind of cool. This could raise me out of the sort of the humdrum of the day-to-day relationship that I'm currently in. And that's very dangerous. I think as human beings, we have to recognize that too much choice can actually be a really bad thing. You know, we think choice is good. We think, oh, it's great, I can go out and buy all of these different types of clothes, or these different kinds of drinks, or these different cars, or whatever. And it is great in a way, but it's also very bad. Because when you've got too much choice, it means that you spread yourself too thinly. And specifically in regard to the dating marketplace, the relationship marketplace, the issue here is that people are finding it harder and harder to settle. People are finding it harder and harder to just accept the vicissitudes of life and say, okay, fine, I'm in this relationship for better or worse. I need to work on it and make sure that it works. What unfortunately seems to be happening is that people are saying, okay, I'm in this relationship, I've been in it for a while, it's kind of not really working out for me, or I'm feeling a little bit bored, or I'm not feeling quite the tingles that I used to feel. And so I'm just going to discard that relationship and I'm going to move on to a better, brighter option. And because of this connectivity and because of this global connectivity, that is becoming easier and easier every single day. So relationships, and particularly long-term relationships, are challenged. Now, as I said, this isn't to be overly pessimistic about this. It's not that it's something that you can't do anything about and you can never find a partner to be with longer term. But you need to be aware of these dynamics. You know, you need to be aware that if you are getting married to an attractive girl and she's on social media, then the fact that she's married isn't going to prevent those guys from sliding into her DMs. It's not going to prevent her from at least being exposed to these other options. And, you know, as I say, like it or not, that is going to have a knock-on effect, even if only marginally, even if only psychologically on her, because there's always going to be this sense of, well, okay, so he's here on my scale, but this guy's here. And did I settle too soon for this guy who's here? You know, what would it be like if I just started chatting to this guy who's here just to sort of see how that conversation goes? It's really, really tough. You know, we're presented with all of these opportunities. We're all human. And by the way, as well, I should emphasize here that this isn't just girls. This is guys as well, of course. And, you know, I don't want to get into some whole thing about women are like this or men are like this. I mean, as human beings, let's be clear, we are self-interested. Now, that doesn't mean that we lack altruism. It doesn't mean that we will, you know, not do the right thing if, you know, we have good enough reason to do so. If we are in love with somebody, if we care about somebody, we'll of course, yes, we are capable of doing the right thing. But you have to think about the dynamics that are going on socially. You have to think about what's happening globally. You have to think about the pressure under which that's being put and think about how that can sort of affect you in terms of your, you know, relationship, in terms of your navigating this sexual marketplace that we are now seeing. And look at what's happening around us. You know, increasingly we're seeing content coming out about polyamory. which is basically, and frequently, by the way, this content is about, a woman who's married with 2 guys or 3 guys or something like that. They're all living in a house together. We see this stuff all the time. We see lots of articles now coming out about this question of polyamory. Could I do it? Is it going to be good for me? Or how do I open up my marriage in order to bring, somebody else into it? You see these kinds of things in problem pages. You see women writing articles about this kind of stuff. Imagine how you would feel if you're married to somebody and then suddenly they say, oh, actually, I'm kind of thinking, why don't we open this up? Why don't we bring someone else into the equation? I mean, that's not a place that you want to be. But why is this happening? Well, I think it's happening for a couple of reasons. I think one of the reasons is that monogamy itself has always been extremely challenging. And of course, there's this whole question of whether human beings are actually naturally meant to be monogamous or not. I would go along with my friend Tom Torero, who's always said, human beings are monogamish. I think monogamy absolutely is an instinct. Pair bonding is 100% an instinct for human beings. But, human beings also like a bit of variety, men and women. And so, you've got those kind of contradictory things pulling you in one direction or the other. You've got you want the security, she wants the security of the solid relationship, but also there are the temptations over here. And what's happened recently is that with social media, and also, by the way, with the loosening of the social contract, in a sense, the way that, divorce is not stigmatized now in the way that it once was. In fact, it's almost encouraged in some situations. I make no comment about that, but that's the reality. There is very much a culture of, if it's broke, don't try to fix it, just go and get another one. And we see that in the consumerism around us. We see that in buying clothes, in buying, fast fashion, all of these kinds of different areas. And sadly, we also see it in relationships as well. Again, as I say, I take no pleasure in this, but this is what you're up against. This is the landscape that you have to navigate. And I think the reason that polyamory is now becoming commented on, it's getting talked about a lot, is for this very reason, that people are less happy to settle for a single option when they know there are other options out there. And so with a polyamory situation, you have the case of effectively a woman, unless it's the other way around, but let's say a woman who kind of wants to have her cake and eat it. She wants to have the security of the relationship, but she also wants some other guys there as well. What you think about that is obviously it's a personal thing, and some people would say, well, those guys are happy to be in that relationship, and maybe they are, and whatever floats your boat, that's absolutely fine. But here's the thing, for me that doesn't seem to be ideal, and I don't think that's actually what most guys really want. So we need to recognize that this is a problem, and of course infidelity is the other thing. We see the infidelity on the rise, and the same thing with polyamory. People are recognizing that there are options out there. They're recognizing that they can trade up, and men do this and women do this. So let's not be under any illusions here. People are recognizing that they can trade up, and they can trade up globally. This is the thing. It's not just like, oh, I could. So I'm married to Sam, and I could separate from Sam, and I could start seeing Jim at the local pub, and that would be great. No, now it could be, well, I'll separate from Sam, and then I'm going to move to the south of France because this guy on Instagram has messaged me, and he seems really cute and really kind of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a vastly different landscape to the one that we've grown up with, most of us, and we need to be aware of it. We need to be realistic about it, and we need to prepare for it the best that we can. We need to make ourselves unassailable as much as we can in the dating marketplace. Now, there are some people who are denialists of all this kind of thing, particularly very traditional, conservative type commentators who will they're probably aware of these dynamics. They're probably aware of these social changes, of these technological changes, but they kind of they just want to ignore it. They just want to put it to one side and sort of say, oh yeah, but that's just, if you can just find a good partner to settle down with, then you'll be happy. You've just got to work on your relationship. You've just got to man up and do the right thing, and then it'll all be fine. That strikes me as very, very naive. I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with what they're saying, except that it doesn't seem to me to tally with the reality on the ground. Because the reality, as much as you can wish these dynamics away, the fact is that they exist, they are there, and you need to be aware of that. So, as I said before, what you need to do is to seek to become unassailable within the dating market. And that's what I outline in this course. This is the roadmap that I give you in this course. Because here's the thing, right? It's not enough anymore just to be able to send some cheeky message on a dating app. It's not enough, in a sense, game, as we used to call it, which is the art of seduction, if you like. It's the art of initiating romantic and sexual relationships. In a sense, game isn't enough anymore. This is the point. People worry about the fact that PUA channels have been disappearing from the internet, that game channels have been being taken down, but that sort of overlooks perhaps the deeper question, which is game actually enough in the end anymore anyway? And I would argue that it isn't. I think you need something more, because game has become so widespread that actually a lot of people know about it, a lot of people understand the techniques, they understand the psychology. So it's less of a competitive advantage than perhaps it was back in the early 2000s. And here's the thing as well. People are very used to communicating online. It's almost like it's gone, how can I say? It's almost like people would always worry about whether game, let's say day game, for example, which is the art of going out during the daytime and meeting new people, cold approaching girls, say in coffee shops or libraries or bookshops or in the street or whatever. People would always worry that day game would become oversaturated, that too many people would find out about it, and that it would go completely mainstream and it wouldn't work anymore. And the thinking was that the internet would proliferate this knowledge of day game, and so it would become this kind of like overdone thing, and all girls would know about it, and it wouldn't be effective. Ironically, though, what's happened is that the internet itself has sort of prevented that from happening, because as awareness of game and of day game and dating techniques has risen, what's also risen is the dating apps and the social apps. And so, as we've been saying, more and more people are meeting through that, and they're not actually approaching in real life. They're not able to go into those physical face-to-face interactions and create a good impression and escalate to the point where it's sort of sexualized, and then take that on to the next stage of going on a date and so on and so forth. They're less able to do that now. And so what you need to do is not just have your online game down. So yes, you can ping messages. Yes, you can, get some swipes on Tinder. You can you can start to interact with people online. But what about when you actually meet them in real life? What about on the date? And the point about all of this, right, is you need to find ways to stand out. If there's one message that kind of underlies everything else in this course, is that you need to find ways to stand out from the crowd, because the crowd is bigger than it ever was before. It's global. There's a lot of them out there, and you are competing, unfortunately, now with some of the top players in the world. I'm friends with people who have blue tick Instagram accounts, who have lots of money, who have lots of pictures of themselves in expensive cars, very intelligent, top business people who are able to attract the best of the best in terms of the women in the population. So you are competing. You're not just competing with the guy from down the street anymore. You're not competing even with the local personal trainer who all the girls fancy. Yes, you're probably still competing with those people, but you're also competing with the guy who's at the top of the tree as well. So it's never been more pressured than it is now in terms of what you need to do to stand out. But luckily, because as I said, I don't want anyone to take any negativity from this, luckily, the methods are all out there for you to create that amazing impression when you meet somebody, for you to differentiate yourself from the crowd and really stand out and really draw her into your world, which is what you need to do, okay? So what I'm going to be teaching throughout the rest of this course are the techniques that you need to do that. And what we're going to lean into very heavily is charisma. Because as I said, here's the thing, right? Game, yes, it's good to know some lines, it's good to know some techniques, and rest assured, we will be going through that in detail later on in the course. But without that X factor, it all falls a bit flat, okay? Now, I've taught many guys about dating dynamics. I've taught guys day game and so on. And one thing I would say is this. I've taught guys who really know about game. They've read all of the books, they've watched the videos, they've had tuition, blah. They know about sexual dynamics. They know what they're supposed to be doing. They know the kinds of things they should be saying. But they lack that kind of X factor, they lack that kind of special something. And I watched their interactions and I think it just fell flat. And it's not that he was saying anything wrong, it's that there just wasn't enough of himself in it. Now, I appreciate this is quite an esoteric thing to talk about and it's not the easiest thing to teach, but the reason I'm putting this course together is because I think it's important to pass this on, because this is what's really going to make the difference. Charisma, which, by the way, is a scientifically studied entity. This is something that has serious academic attention now, and we'll get into that in subsequent sections, is the thing that's going to really make the difference. It's the thing that's going to tip the balance, because most of the guys who are going and approaching that girl or talking to that girl that you like are probably doing similar kinds of things, or they're saying similar sorts of things. And you can use the same methods, but you've got to bring something else to the party. And learning charisma will help you to do that. We're then going to go in and talk a bit about radical differentiation, which is even more on this point of, how do I stand out from the crowd? And that can be to do with the way that you dress, but really what it comes down to is a mindset. It comes down to understanding yourself on a very granular, deep level, and then being able to sort of communicate that through everything about your persona. And it's that energy, and it's that spark, it's that fire that you're able to bring to the girl that is really going to tip the balance. And by the way, this is the case whether it's in the daytime, whether it's in the nighttime, whether it's at the pool party in Vegas, it doesn't matter. You've still got to use these techniques. So we're going to talk about radical differentiation. And then we're going to go into dark triad. Now, dark triad is very interesting and very important in terms of really giving a bit of edge to your character. Okay, so I'll explain what the dark triad is when we get further down the line, but it's basically Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, which are very unpleasant sounding attributes. But if you can just spice up your presentation a little bit with elements of that, because the truth is you are probably too much of a nice guy. That's the truth of the matter. Most people who come to this space are nice guys, and you need to have a little bit of edge. So when you learn about the dark triad, which you will later on in the course, then you'll be able to sort of spice things up a little bit with that. So that's really important stuff as well. And then all of those things combined, you then pull together and incorporate into your game. So then we'll be talking about game itself, we'll be talking about specific techniques, we'll be talking about exactly what you need to do to initiate those relationships with new girls, whether you're looking to be a player and have different girls around the globe at the same time, which is eminently possible these days, or if you are somebody who's looking for a long-term relationship, or even if you're looking to get married, the principles are the same, because you're still competing in this global sexual marketplace. So you need this stuff in order to be successful in that endeavor. So that is the introduction as far as the course is concerned. That's the introduction as far as charisma is concerned. And in the next section, what we're going to be talking about is the amazing opportunities that are available. Because, as I said, I don't want anybody to come away from this with any feeling of negativity, because as much as things can be tough out there, the opportunities are also unprecedented in the whole history of humankind. So it is a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be going out and socializing, and it's a great time to be learning about dating dynamics and being able to apply them in your real life.